Good morning.
Morning, Izzy.
Morning, Dov.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Let's get started. So, yesterday we learned an important caveat to all of this idea that once a child becomes of age, you can't take away the gift from him. And we said that when it comes to children who are dependents upon their parents, so uh, the child has to relinquish gifts to the parent only when they're a minor. But if they've received gifts as an adult, legally adult over the age of bar mitzvah, the parent does not have a right to demand for that gift from the child. And I just wanted to show you the in the biurim, we just he quotes the Rama over here. Kasav harama v'imnasno matana lekatan hasamach al shulchan aviv arehi shel aviv avalo bivno hagadol ad kan l'sham. He quotes the Rama that says just that, and if I just, without going into too much detail, he says on the bottom 3 lines of that biurim, he says ve'al pi divrei harama miyushav minhag ha'olam. We can understand based on this Rama, there's a minhag sheha'av misalek v'lokeach lifa'amim eza chayfetz miyad beno hakatan shekiblo b'matana. That there are some times that a father will take away a gift that a child has received as a gift, v'lo chosheshem mishum iser geza. And we don't have to be concerned about the laws of theft in that issue, even though normally taking something from a child is gezel, if the child at least has enough das, has enough knowledge to know what he has. Mishum de medina hu shayach leha'av, because when a child is a dependent upon a parent and is under bar mitzvah, really everything belongs to the father. B'chol ze amur afilu heicha sheha'av misalek mimenu hachefetz shelo b'toras chinuch. And this is all true even if the father takes the object away from the child for non-educational reasons, let's say as a punishment. But if he's doing it in order to educate the child, in other words, I shouldn't say that. Really, when you punish a child, many times or all the time, it's supposed to be for educational purposes. Let's say the father takes it away from the child because the father wants to use it himself, or the kid got a chocolate bar that it's the father's favorite. So technically, the father has a right to partake in that chocolate without asking the child. But if the father is doing it to educate the child, because the child has misbehaved, and the father says, if you do that, I'm taking away your controller for your game console. He says, then there's certainly not a problem. Shaharei kamo sherashai lahalkoso avor zeh hu hadin derashai lakachetz es chafetzav letzorach chinucho. Because just like a parent is allowed to strike a child for educational purposes, in other words, it's still permitted according to halacha to give your child a patch in the tuchis. So you're also allowed to take things away from him. In other words, there are certain rights that a parent has over a child. And then he says that he's seen in a certain sefer called Machanei Ephraim, that there's a long discussion on this very matter of taking items away from children. But at the end of the day, this is really the halacha, that even items that were given to a child by a third party, a parent does have a right to take away or control the objects or the assets, but only so long as the child is a minor. Once the child becomes bar mitzvah, then the parent really doesn't have control over those items. Okay. Now, of course, this can create problems when a child is a teenager. It does limit a parent's ability to take things away from the child. Okay. Also, what I wanted to see is the likutim. So let's go back. Okay, so let's see. We'll start over here. So we're in the Likutim on at the beginning of Sif Yud. We had said the whole premise of this halacha was that when a gift is given to a katan, to a minor, as long as the child has proper cognizance to know the difference between an item of value and an item of no value, then you're not allowed to take it away from him, because it has been given to him by an adult, and that adult has created a transaction that legally binds the item to the minor. So in the Likutim he writes as follows: Hade amrinan de beika da'as acheres makna oso zachabo hakatan min haTorah. He says what we're saying basically is that when an adult who has cognizance, who has das, gives the item to a child, it legally belongs to the child, even biblically. Hainu b'matana. That all is said when a gift is given from an adult to a minor. Aval b'mekach u'memkar shahakatan nasan mos avor mekach nechleku bazeh haposkim ikana min haTorah. But let's say we're dealing with a purchase. Child puts down cash and purchases an item. Is that a legal transaction biblically or not? So the poskim have a difference of opinion. Ho'il ve'ein hakatan makne es hadamim l'mocher min haTorah mishum hachi lo zacha hakatan b'mekach she'ein hamocher makne lo mekcho ele im kein hu yizke b'damim. And the interesting discussion there is, the entire basis for the adult giving the child the merchandise is based on the fact that the child is relinquishing the cash and giving it to the merchant. But as we've mentioned before, a child can be kona something, but he can't be makna something. He cannot relinquish an item that belongs to him and give it over to somebody else, even to an adult. Remember, we talked about that when we talked about making sure that your child you don't give your child the lulav and esrog on the first day of Sukkot before you've benched lulav, because when he gives it back to you, he doesn't have sufficient knowledge to reverse the transaction. So therefore, the poskim question whether this halacha works. Is it a biblically binding transaction when you do purchases with a minor, or does this only apply to gifts? So we're going to leave that alone. He just raised that point. He then talks about a Gentile minor. Katan akum yesh omrim din higia lichlal das de misavri le v'savar im kein hu nechshav legadol lemekcha mekach min haTorah. He says there are some who are of the opinion that as long as a child reaches the age of discernment, even if the child is before bar mitzvah, before the age of 13, he has the halachic status of an adult because he's not Jewish. And the argument being, Dahad amrinan da'ad ben yud gimel shana ubei cyrus dino kikatan, Chasav Harosh B'tshuva, Dehu Bichlal Shiur and Shenemar L'Moshe Misina. He says, because as the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, as he points out, this law that when you reach the age of 13 and you start puberty, that you have the law of an adult only at that point, that is a measurement, that's a criterion of age that was only given to the Jewish people at Har Sinai. And so it could be that this halacha of when do you become an adult at age 13 only applies to Jews and doesn't apply to non-Jews. Non-Jews become adults not at the age of 13 per se, but they become adults whenever they reach the age of discernment. The Harekos of Harambam Shalaven Noach Lo Nemru Shiurim. The Rambam writes explicitly that these measurements and these criteria were only given to the Jewish people and not to non-Jews. In Kanim Higia L'Shir Ben Das Azay Nechshavu Min Torah Legadol. And then, therefore, when a Gentile minor reaches the age of cognizance, of discernment, so then even if he's under bar mitzvah, he's considered to be a gadol. The davar zeh hu gam le'inyan shar onshim, kegon gezel ve'arayos dehu nenash kishigia lechlal das, gamim hu lifnei yid gimel shana. And it goes both ways. If a minor is considered an adult as far as a transaction is concerned because he's not Jewish, then the same thing applies to his level of culpability. If a minor Gentile child commits a violation, and that is a violation of the 7 Noachide laws, then he's punishable even before the age of bar mitzvah. But then there are others who challenge this premise, and therefore it needs further examination. But at least he raises an interesting concept, which is that perhaps the status of a Gentile child is different from the status of a Jewish child, halachically, as far as their level of adulthood when they reach adulthood. Okay, let's go on to the next piece. Zacha b'matana, the child legally owns the gift that is given to him by an adult. So the Likutim continues by saying, Umihai taima yesh omrin. There are therefore some who say, De'efshar liftos bechor eitzel kohen katan. So, pidyon haben. Let's say I want to do a pidyon haben. I want to redeem my firstborn son, and I have to find a kohen, right? So, what if I want to use a kohen that's under the age of bar mitzvah? Am I permitted to do so? Well, the father of the baby is an adult, and we said that if you give a gift to a minor, the minor legally acquires that gift. So therefore it would follow that if I want to give my 5 silver shekels to a minor kohen, then that should work. I fulfill the mitzvah of pidyon haben, right? However, he says, v'yesh mefakfakin, but some question that. He says, but if you open up the Art Scroll Siddur and look at the, I think it's like on page 210 or something like that, in the Art Scroll Siddur, that it talks about the give and take that is supposed to happen between the Kohen and the father. And the rabbi said that the Kohen is supposed to ask the father, which do you prefer? Do you prefer to redeem your child for 5 shekels, or do you prefer for your newborn child to belong to God and to belong to me? You wish to give me your child, or do you wish to give me the 5 shekels? Now, of course, that's not really the way it works. If a man does not do a pidyon haben on his firstborn, the Kohen does not have a right to whisk the child off to a monastery and to prepare him for temple service. But that's essentially what the rabbi said the Kohen is supposed to ask the father. The chol divrei and divrei Kabbalah v'Torah. And once they institute that rule, then it raises problems because that now is the protocol for a pidyon haben. And umashma mizeh shegam lekohen atzmo yesh koach b'maisa hapigeon, and therefore they're sort of creating through that script that they've created, they are implying or imparting to the Kohen some type of control over the exchange that's taking place. And therefore, a katan does not have that level of power to be able to do that. And so therefore, even though technically we would suppose that a pidyon haben could be performed with a minor Kohen, nonetheless, based on that script that you have to read, that the Kohen has to read, which implies that he is in control of this transaction, a minor Kohen should not be the Kohen for a pidyon haben. Okay. Now, finally, ve'eno yachol lachzar bo. If an adult gifts a gift to a minor, he does not have the ability to withdraw the gift. That's what we had said, right? Ve'im ha'av nasan matana livno. Now, let's say a father gives a gift to his son. Ika plug to the Rabbavasa. We have now a machlokas. What's the machlokas? Diyesh omrim da'afilu hu gadol mikol makom imusamach al shulchan aviv lo zachabo. Some say that even if the child is halachically an adult, but he's a dependent on his father, he's still living in his father's house. Therefore, in that situation, since the father is the gifter of the gift, the child does not really acquire the object halachically. Some say in that situation that the child does not become the legal owner, and as I explained in the biurim, this is a long discussion. According to the Ramah, like we saw yesterday, the child does become, if he's an adult child, he does become the legal owner as long as it was gifted to him from someone else. But here, this is a special case where the father gifts it to the son. Some wish to suggest that when the father gifts it to the son, the father still controls the gift and therefore has a right to withdraw it, even if the child is an adult. Okay. And let's go on to the next likutim. Melamed. What if you have a teacher? A teacher has certain controls over a student. Ishari le'lakachas chayfetz miyad talmido. Can a teacher confiscate an item from a child in the classroom? On the one hand, the teacher needs to create decorum in the classroom, but on the other hand, there's a child who is the legal owner of that object. What right does a teacher have to confiscate an object that belongs legally to the child? So he says, I refer you to later on in Siman Zayin when we get to the laws of theft. So I figured let's just take a quick look at that for just a second. Let me see. So here you should have it on your screen. Okay. And it's right over here in the second column. If you see my blue cursor, I hope you can see that. He writes as follows. Melamed, a teacher. Muter lo lakachas miyad hatino chayfetz she'al yadahu nimna mililmod o mafriya la'acher. A teacher is allowed to confiscate an object. And this he's quoting from the Mishnah Halachos. A teacher is allowed to confiscate an item from a child who is not, if the child is, through that object, is not studying properly or is disrupting the classroom. The kaven, and what's the reason? He says, the kaven de ha'av masr l'malamed harehu masr l'takanas v'tovas hakatan. He says, because once the father of the child submits the child to the classroom, he is also in the course of submitting his child to that school, is basically giving instructions that the teacher should do whatever is in the best interests of the child. V'harehu ka'apotropos. And therefore, the teacher is almost like a custodian of the father. He's like a proxy of the father. And just like the father has a right to confiscate an object from his minor child, so too a teacher is endowed with those same rights as the parent.
So you say effectively delegates.
Yeah, the father is basically delegating to the Rebbe or the teacher the right to do to the child whatever the father has the right to do. Now, of course, that has to be limited, that has to be qualified. Here, we're saying that the teacher is endowed with the rights of confiscation of materials. Okay? What about corporal punishment? When a father gives over his child to the classroom, is the father giving over the rights to the teacher to strike his child? That's the way it used to be in the old days, but not anymore. No, now we can assume that that is not what the parent is endowing the teacher the rights with. Aval, but then he qualifies it and he says, Lakachas mimenu es hachefetz la'olam o la'abdo ze asur. He says, but are you allowed to take the object permanently from the child? Or are you allowed to destroy the object? He says that you're not allowed to do. Ela im kain, unless, he says, lefi ra'os einav yesh la'abdo l'takonas hatalmidim. Unless, he says, he sees value in destroying the object as a means to, in some way, rectifying the child or the children that are in the classroom. Of course, this is very subjective, but ultimately, if a person is a teacher, they have a halachic obligation, in most cases, to return the object to the child at some point. You cannot permanently, the general rule is you cannot permanently confiscate something. You have to give it back at the end of the school year or at the end of the day or at the end of the semester, whatever it is. And this, of course, is only stated when it comes to minor children, because the teacher can only be a custodian over that which the father has rights. The father only has rights to confiscate his minor children's property. A teacher, however, once a child reaches the age of 13, does not have rights of confiscation anymore. It turns out, according to this halacha. And so a rebbe or a teacher can't take away a boy's phone once the kid gets into high school. You're not allowed to confiscate it. Now, the school can make a policy that you have to deposit your phone. You can't bring a phone to the school, or but I remember when I was in yeshiva, they would go around the dorm, and anyone that was found with a radio would have the radio confiscated. But of course, you were entitled to get it back at the end of the school year. You just had to know who to go to see before you packed up and packed out of there. But
so that confiscation is just following the rules of the school, that no radios or phones are permitted in the school, as opposed to taking it away from the individual. Like, it seems very gray, that particular area, but taking away then on that basis.
well, I suppose that there's a tacit agreement. Perhaps it was already there. Once the policy was instituted, that if you're going to be part of our dormitory or part of our school, you're not allowed to have a phone, right? You tacitly agree that if you are caught with a phone, that phone is going to be confiscated. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the school has the right to permanently keep the phone. According to what we're seeing here, that it's permitted to confiscate it, but you can't keep it. It certainly has to be returned. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to the Imrei Yaakov. All right. Let's start a new halacha, because I think we've pretty much exhausted this topic for now. So we're up to halacha Yud Aleph. Okay. Now we're getting into the laws of proxyship and custodianship with this halacha of halacha Yud Aleph. The halacha has to do with the monetary law of a proxy. And a proxy has an obligation to fulfill his proxyship. But what happens if the proxy benefits financially? Does the financial benefit belong to the dispatcher, the person who made him into his proxy, or does the benefit belong to the proxy? So the terms for the dispatcher is mishaleach in Hebrew, and the term for proxy is shaliach. Okay, so shaliach is the proxy, mishaleach is the dispatcher. Okay, hanosen lechavero maos liknos lo davar sheyesh lo shar katsu v'yadua. Let's say Reuven sends his friend Shimon, and he makes his friend Shimon his shaliach, and he says, "Here, Shimon, here's $100. Purchase for me 10 widgets." Okay, and the widgets have a fixed price in the marketplace. Let's say, okay, so the assumption is that Shimon is going to purchase 10 widgets for $100. V'hosif hamocher l'shaliach. And what happens is that the merchant actually is generous and gives 11 widgets to Shimon for the $100 instead of giving him the 10 widgets. So the question now is, who is the legal owner of that 11th widget? Harei zos hatosefes matana ve'ein tzarich litna kula lebal hamos elechetzia. So the halacha is that since there was a fixed price on these widgets, we consider the 11th widget a gift and not a portion of the sale. And therefore, the proxy is supposed to take that 11th widget and split it between himself and the dispatcher and the mishalech. So Reuven gets 10 and a half widgets, and Shimon gets a half a widget. Ki ein hadavar yadua lemi nasan matanazu lahashaliach ole hamashalech. And the reason why they split it is because it's a suffix. We're not really sure. The merchant, when he gave that gift of an 11th widget, to whom was he granting that gift? Was he granting the gift to Reuven, or was he granting the gift to Shimon? Is it because he liked the purchaser or he liked the proxy? And since we're not really sure what the thought of this, to whom this gift should go to, we tell Reuven and Shimon to split that 11th widget. The Yesh Omrim, and some go even further, and they say, Sha'afilu piresh lo hamocher, shenostam lo tzarech litein chetzi lahamishaleach. Some say that even if the merchant told Shimon while he was in the store, it's been nice schmoozing with you, and I know that you don't have the same kind of money that that Reuven, your dispatcher, has. So here's 10 widgets for the guy who dispatched you, and here's a widget for you. Even if he says that explicitly, Shimon still has a halachic responsibility to split that widget with his dispatcher. Hoil va'al yedei ma'osav ba'alo hana'azu. And the reason is because since I received this benefit of this widget because my Reuven sent me on this task to purchase 10 widgets for him, I have a responsibility to compensate him for the benefit that he caused me to receive. And so it's a huge chiddush, right? Because you would think that if the merchant said explicitly, this widget is for you, then he told me explicitly it's for me. But no, some say that I have to actually share that gift with my dispatcher. The Yirei Shamayim Yachush L'Divrayim. And a God-fearing Jew should try to abide by that latter opinion, even though it means that he'll have to end up giving a half of whatever he received. And the same thing would be true that in principle, anytime I receive a benefit because someone has sent me on a task, then I really morally owe that dispatcher who caused me to go on this particular path. I have to show him recognition. Aval imhu davar, but that's all if the price is fixed. Aval imhu davar she'ein lo shar katsuv chayav litein hakol lameshalech. He says, let's say Reuven gives me $100, and he says, I want you to buy as many widgets as you can get for this $100. And there is no fixed price on widgets in the marketplace. The Reuven says to Shimon, usually you can get one widget for $10, but sometimes the market fluctuates. And Shimon gets lucky and is able to get 11 widgets for $100. In that situation, he's got to give all 11 widgets to his dispatcher. Ki ein kan matana elamekach bezol, because the way that we surmise why he got 11 widgets is not because the merchant is giving him a gift, but rather it's because the market price fluctuated, and now you can get widgets for a little bit less than $10, and therefore for $100 you can get 11 widgets instead of just 10. Even though when Reuven dispatched him, he said, you can get them for $10 a piece, and then the price goes down. He says, in that situation, the price differential is to the dispatcher's benefit, is to Reuven's benefit, not to Shimon's benefit. Okay, so that's the general halacha. And we'll read this, we'll go over this again tomorrow, and we'll go over this last line, and we'll see how what the rights of a proxy are further as we get more and more into this section of halacha. Questions, comments?
Rabbi, does it make a difference if the shaliach is paid or not?
It's a good question. We don't see any differentiation over here that's mentioned. Let's see when we get more into this halacha if such a difference appears. Okay? So have a great day, everybody.
Shkoyach, Rabbi.
See you
Thank
next
you,
time.
Rabbi.
Okay, everyone, be well.